Okay, and we'll start with Herb.
Good afternoon, Portland. Portland CCUMC, how are you doing? This incredible crowd, I can't believe it. All right. I am Herb Coleman, and as she said, I'm the Director of Instructional Computing and Technology, which means I provide the classroom technology for all the classrooms in the district. And I'm also an adjunct professor of psychology, and I've been teaching psychology for 25 years at Austin Community College. So one of the courses I teach is human sexuality. And for ever since I began teaching, I've always wanted to do some things where you can ask questions where you're not really asking students to raise their hand. And so in 2004, I was fortunate enough to be reading the New York Times tech column, and David Pogue was talking about clickers. And it worked out for me that I did a little bit of research on e-instruction, and they were offering a training that next month in my area. And so my first sling clickers I got, CPS clickers. Mine didn't actually look like this. They were the IR kind, and they had the receiver that looked like a little UFO. So I used those for polling, for homework, and for assignments. I didn't have any real issues with it except for the normal issues you get with infrared, which means you have to aim them at the receiver, and then sometimes there can be interference, but there was really no problem, except for I did a training, and another psychology professor said, "Oh, this is great, I want to do it too." Wouldn't you know, the next semester, we were scheduled at the same time on the same campus, both wanting to use them. So I said, we got to get some more. That next year at TCCTA, there was a demo on Turning Point. Now, Turning Point was a little bit different in that, one, it offered 10 options instead of just 8. It also allowed for game scoring. So when you do games, it would show you the team leaders or individual leaders, who's scoring higher as you go through the game. It lets you do ranking, so instead of just selecting A, B, C, or D, you can actually put them in order. And then finally, the thing that I liked the most was it had data slicing. So if you do polling on one slide, let's say a demographic slide of freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors, then you can do another slide and see how the freshmen answered and how the sophomores answered and see if there's any difference. That same year, the physics department did an innovation grant, and they started using Turning Point for all their teaching there. And so that was this one. Oh no, I'm sorry. It's actually this is Turning Point. It was the flat card one that I was using there. The other cool thing about Turning Point was when it first came out, it integrated with PowerPoint, hence their name, and Word. It had a thing called a parser. So if you had a test you already created, just with a few little additions to that, it would automatically import your test into the question software. And being the lazy guy that I am, really went for that. And their reports came out in Excel. So it worked with the software you already used. It had a little teardrop receiver, and that was one of the key things. That little teardrop receiver with IR, you had to really aim a lot, or sometimes had to tape it so that it was facing them the right way. I didn't have any real issues with that until we were using it for faculty orientation, and they updated their software the night before. So you know what happened. And the president was there, and everyone was there, and so Turning Point was not our friend after that for a while. So I went back to CPS, or e-instruction, and then got these kinds of clickers. These are the radio frequency ones. So these you don't have to point in any direction. You can just in the room and you do it. Now what's interesting, students still do that. They still point, and they'll stand up in the back and they'll be pointing when they're clicking sometimes. I had conferences with e-instruction during that time, and they added data slicing, and they added something called CPS for PowerPoint, so that made it easier to integrate as well. And then their reports for the Macintosh had improved too, because previously it only gave you like 2 reports, and now it gave you the full slate of reports. So it was great then, and I liked using it then. It worked better. I trained the International Students Office in using it, and that's where the value of clickers really showed its value, because these are students who are in an orientation session where they've got to get this information correct. And when they would do what's called a knowledge check, you go through a part of your presentation, you throw up 3 or 4 questions to make sure that they got the information. And there was one question that was so important that if they got it wrong, they could be deported. And 40% of the people got it wrong. And it's like, and then when they explained why they thought that was the answer, it was like so interesting. So I said, this is a whole new way. I will never teach again without clickers. Student orientation got on board, and they bought a whole set for all their orientations, which seated like 200 students at a time using clickers to gather data for theirs. And so then I obviously had to get enough for the entire college. We have one set per campus plus 2 roaming sets. So if my co-psychology professors are on the same campus at the same time, we can each have a set now. And so this is the one that I use the most now. And it also comes in this flavor variety. This is the latest one. They no longer make this one. This is what your replacements would look like with CPS. Then there was this thing that was out there called iClicker. iClicker was created by professors, I believe in Iowa, and a lot of people liked it. Now, one of the interesting things about them is that they sold their clickers independent with their receiver. So for like $60 you get a receiver, $30 you get a response card. People were growing their own sets instead of having to plump down $2,600 for a full set. And so, yes, the library and the Office for Institutional Effectiveness got some of these, so I had to learn how to use them to help them use them. And it worked pretty well. They're very simple. If you want to just do some straightforward Q&A, do some polling, it works pretty well. For a class, I wasn't impressed with the way you had to log in with it. And then it had a USB receiver that I don't know what the library did, but they spread a virus throughout our system. So we had to go clean up those USB drives and make all that work. Other than that, many people like iClicker because it is pretty simple once you set it up, that if you have no experience with it, it takes about 3 minutes for people to finally get the hang of it, and they can kind of go. And if you're not assigning it to students individually and you just want to get some general data, it works great for that. In Austin, we get a lot of K through 12 conferences there, and there was a company that had theirs, and it was Quizdom. Now, their original ones were like these owl-shaped ones, K through 12, and they were kind of interesting, but I was not willing to buy those for the college. The reason I was interested in them is because they did have the software that would allow you to actually send the question to the little screen on the clicker. So that way you don't have to even print out a test, because with these what happens is you pass out the test, students circle their answers, and then they click in their answers just like they would on a Scantron. Well, with these, you can send the question straight to there. They answer the question right in there, and then they send them all at the end. At least that's the way it was advertised. I never got it to work correctly, and when I finally did, the setup was so cumbersome that I couldn't see myself training other faculty to do that. And so we've got them, but we don't use them a whole lot. And then finally, about 2 years ago, somebody made me an offer I couldn't refuse. And so for $300, HITT offered me an IR set of 36, and they still had the capability of doing the student managed mode, which is very important. So iClicker didn't have student managed mode before, and Turning Point originally didn't have it. So that was the problems with both of those. But for $300, that's nothing for the way these things cost. And they also had them color-coded. And so I do a thing called team-based learning where all my students are in teams, so I get 6 green, 6 orange, 6 yellow, and that makes that work fairly well. It works, it has a big old 8-track size receiver, and you get your typical IR issues. We have to aim and click and that kind of thing. I finally went back to Turning Point for these. So in team-based learning, you do 2 things. One of the things you do is the students all take their test individually, then they take the exact same test in their groups with their teams, and they have to explain their answers and argue their answers and agree on their answers and that kind of thing. I liked the software that Turning Point did with these because it allowed me to display their results, and if they get the answer right, it shows a check, green check. If they get the answer wrong, it shows a red X. And so they have to go back on their team and argue to get the right answer, and they try it again. And the best thing about it is the software tracks that. So I know how many times they tried before they got the right answer, and you can see as they go along as they get the right answer. And students love that. You see them when they finally get the right answer, they'll high five and all this other kind of stuff like that. So for my classes, I use these 2 for that particular purposes. I would love to use these in general, but I don't know if you can tell it from the keypad, but it's a little bit complicated, this keypad, and it's got some abilities where you can get in trouble. You can push a back button, and then you can change the reception. You could do all kinds of things with it. And also to log in. So it's a regular keypad where if you hit 1, it's A, B, it's 2, that kind of thing. But to log in the first time, it goes back to the old phone texting thing. So to enter in B, you have to hit the 2 button 2 times and that kind of thing. And I found that difficult for them. So I logged them in when they use these for their teams, and it kind of works just fine for me. And that's what works for me now. So my big takeaways are that software matters. That's really what separates all of these, is the software that drives them. For me, it's ease of use for the students over ease of use for me. So that's what's most important for them. The big thing about this is that you can start small. If you can get a set of clickers, or if you get your students to buy the clickers, you can start with just doing some basic polling questions, a basic think, pair, share. You throw a question, you show the results, and you say, turn to your neighbor and ask, why do you think 70% of people chose C? And they'll discuss it, come back, repoll it, and then show the correct answer. You can use it for knowledge checks or go up for full testing. And with 30 seconds over, that's my take on clickers.
Okay. That's because my mic's upside down. I think I'm going to turn this off.